I dated James for 3 years thinking he was just another broke grad student like me, that his grandmother had a stroke and suddenly we were flying across the country on his family's private jet. The truth about his wealth changed everything hearted but not in the way you'd expect. The first time I met James, he was wearing faded jeans with a hole in the knee and trying to negotiate with the campus coffee shop barista to let him pay tomorrow for today's coffee. His student ID card had been declined per it again. I stepped in and paid the $4.75 and he promised to buy mine the next day. That coffee turned into dinner at his tiny studio apartment where he made surprisingly good pasta on a hot plate. The apartment was clean but sparse paired to a futon that doubled as his bed, a wobbly desk from Goodwill, and a bookshelf made of cinder blocks and wooden planks. Aquapecig broke grad student Decker. For 3 years we lived the typical struggling student life. We split checks at cheap restaurants, celebrated when either of us found decent furniture on the curb, and spent date nights watching movies on his laptop. Because neither of us had a dong, James was getting his PhD in environmental science and I was finishing my master's in education. We both had mountains of student debt purred, or so I thought. James never seemed particularly stressed about money, but I assumed that was just his personality. He was always calm, even when his ancient Toyota wouldn't start, or when we had to eat ramen for a week straight at the end of the month. He never complained about his teaching assistant salary or asked his family for help. The only hint something might be different was how he'd occasionally disappear for a weekend to help with family business and return with no details to share. When I asked questions, he'd just say, "Boring stuff, nothing interesting," and change the subject. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning in April when James got a call that his grandmother had suffered a severe stroke. I found him frantically throwing clothes into a backpack. "I need to get to Boston right away," he said, his voice shaking. "My grandmother raised me after my parents died. She might not make it." I offered to drive him to the airport, but he shook his head. "No need," to hear as a car coming. I assumed he meant an Uber until a black Azurees with tinted windows pulled up outside his apartment building. The driver, wearing a suit and earpiece, stepped out and took James's bag. "Come with me," James said suddenly. "She'd want to meet you. I've told her so much about you." Confused but wanting to support him, I quickly packed an overnight bag. The driver took us not to the commercial airport, but to a private airfield 30 minutes outside the city. That's when I saw it turned a sleek white jet with Reynolds Underdees painted on the side. "James," I whispered as we approached the plane. "What is this?" He squeezed my hand. On board, surrounded by leather seats and polished wood, James finally told me the truth. He wasn't James Reynolds' teaching assistant. He was James Reynolds III, heir to Reynolds Industries Part, a global shipping and logistics company worth billions. His grandmother, Catherine Reynolds, was the CEO and chairwoman who had built the company into what it was today. Why the studio apartment? Why the teaching salary? Why 3 years of pretending? I asked, trying to process this revelation. "I wasn't pretending," he said quietly. "I just wasn't volunteering information. My parents died in a plane crash when I was 8. After that, my grandmother raised me with one rule: earn your own way first. She made me promise I wouldn't touch my trust fund until I finished my PhD and worked in my field for at least 2 years. So the environmental science degree is real. I want to transform Reynolds Edersize environmental impact. That's always been the plan, but Mama insisted I understand what it means to live on an average salary first. She did the same with my father. When we arrived in Boston, another black car took us directly to Massachusetts General Hospital. The Reynolds name was literally on the building wing we entered. Nurses and doctors nodded respectfully as we passed. In a private suite, I met Catherine Reynolds' parent, a tiny woman with fierce eyes even as she lay connected to machines. She gripped my hand with surprising strength. "So you are the girl who's been keeping my grandson grounded," she said, her voice weak but determined. "Good, he needs someone who loved him before she knew about all this."